How from Audible Genesis. How Christian media pros balance work, faith, and family. How is a joint effort of Audible Genesis and B&K Productions. Our theme music is from the Audible Genesis Now library, and yours can be too. Get it at now.audiblegenesis.com. Now on How, meet...
Yeah, my name's Matt March, and yes, that's my real name, not a stage name. I've been accused of that more than once in my career. I'm a full-time hospice chaplain for Assured Hospice in Olympia, Washington, and a midday host for KACS Radio Network in Western Washington.
And how do you make it all work?
Luckily for me, technology has advanced to the point that I don't have to carry a big old day runner that looks like it's going to break, and now I just got to carry a smartphone and a web-based calendar.
Now, how? From Audible Genesis, your hosts from B&K Productions, Brian Doc Irwin and Graham McKay.
Welcome to How, a podcast where we talk with people about how they balance faith, family, and work. This week's guest is Matt March. Now, here's Doc and Matt.
Matt, you balance faith and family with 2 jobs. So tell us how big your family is.
So how big is my family? Well, we've got 3 kids, and they're all adults now. Well, we call them adults with training wheels, right? Lizzie, our oldest, will be 22 this summer. And then our middle daughter, Angela, is 20. And our son, our youngest, is 18, just finished high school. So yeah, they're all adults with training wheels and getting themselves started. So it's my wife and I and our 3 kids. And we have a couple cats at home. And we have a big family, I guess, by today's standards. But it just seems like the right size family, I guess, for us.
So how do you keep from bringing work home or letting stress leak into your family time?
Boy, that's probably about the hardest thing that I have to do all the time, is trying to keep work from coming home or stress leaking into family time. COVID was horrible for this. Rachel was teaching from home. I was still pastoring a church then and basically doing it from home. And, when the pandemic first hit, it was really interesting because, it's just like we had church on Sunday, and that Sunday afternoon, basically, we had to make the decision that we're not going to have worship anymore in person, and we're going to have to do something else. And so within like 3 days, I had to figure out how to use Zoom so that I could give everybody the link, right, by the next Sunday. And then by Sunday, we're doing this Zoom worship service and making it happen. And what was kind of neat is that over the time, right, it just started to build, right? Somebody would say, oh, I can record music, or I can do this, or I can do that. And finally, though, one of my church members had to call me, and he said, Matt, Pastor, you need to stop. You need to stop trying to do all of it. You need to find somebody else to manage the meeting so you can just concentrate on leading worship. And it was a great piece of advice. And so my daughter started managing the Zoom meeting, and it was really a helpful call out, I guess, in that moment. But with the pandemic, right, you're working at home, it was really got hard. And so the other thing that Rachel and I have always had to do, since early in our marriage, we had a counselor sit us down and say, you need to be really clear about who you are to each other, because both of us are in helping positions. Rachel is a special education teacher. I've been a pastor for 20 years and now a hospice chaplain. And so our roles all day long at work are helping people. And then we need to come home and not help each other. That sounds bad, but we need to be each other's spouse. I need to be Rachel's husband. Rachel needs to be my wife. And that needs to be our role in the home. And we have to be willing to call each other out on it and also be self-aware enough of what we're doing. And so a lot of times it's those exterior things. Rachel and I both have monthly counselor appointments. We think that's super important to just keep our mental health good and also give us an appropriate outlet to deal with the stressful jobs that we have, to be able to process some of those things and have that outside voice that's able to say to us, you know what, that's not healthy. And that person can say that to me. And that's really, really important to have that. And so that's kind of some of the things that we do. And then also just trying to teach our kids about some of that, helping them to be able to make a schedule. Our whole family schedule is together, and just making sure that all of us are communicating about those things and trying to make sure that our roles are clear about what we're doing when we're doing it.
We all have a specific app or software that we use to help keep track of life or finances. And I know I remember that when you were younger, you used to have this day planner. I used to tease you about it all the time. But now that we're in the computers and technology, what apps do you use to help with your work and keep track of finances and keep everything in shape?
Seems weird to say because it feels like it's still new technology, but really it's not. For years, we've been using a Google Calendar. That's been our mainstay as far as a family, keeping things on track and knowing where each other is. And I mean, like, we don't put our work schedule in it because that pretty much, stays the same. We know what that is. But if I have, when I'm tracking, that goes into the calendar. When I have a basketball game to announce or a football game or, some other special event, that goes in. When Rachel has after school IEP meeting or something like that, that'll go on the calendar. The kids will put their, dance schedules, their sports schedules, their music schedules, and their doctor's appointments. Everybody's doctor's appointments goes in there. Each person has their own color. And so you're able to kind of at a glance look and say, oh, you know what? Rachel's got a meeting after school that day. So I want to make sure that I can be available to make supper. Or we can kind of look at our week together. Usually we try to do that on Sunday afternoon and just kind of look through the week, especially when the kids were younger and they didn't drive. I mean, now all our kids are pretty much, can get themselves to their places. And so we don't have to worry about them too much. But we'll sit down on a Sunday afternoon and just say, okay, what's this week look like? And are there any, sticking points that we're going to have to figure out, maybe a car or that sort of thing? And just kind of trying to make sure that we're together. That's probably the number one thing. And, some of the other stuff is just having a budget in mind. And anytime we're getting ready to make a big purchase, we don't do that on our own, right? Rachel and I make sure that we talk together. Even, if the car is for me, I'm the main person that's going to be making that decision. We just, last 2 years, we had to buy 2 cars for me. I had a car get totaled. A semi truck hit me while I was working. And so, I'm out by myself shopping for the car, but I got Rachel on the phone and she's helping to kind of keep me under control, right? Because, when you're driving a car, you're like, oh, this car is great. And she can say to me, wait a minute, that's not in our budget. And make sure that we're kind of staying where we need to be. And so a lot of our favorite app is each other, keeping each other accountable for what we're doing and trying to keep things on track and in shape.
So Christian media specifically, there's podcasts, radio, ministry, of course, YouTube. So where do you think we're headed? And where will followers and new believers find what they want and need to hear and see?
Boy, that's a huge question. And we could probably spend hours talking about where this is all going and whether it's good or bad, I suppose. It's something I've thought about a lot. I'm not sure how I feel about where things are going. Radio, I think, is going to be one of those things that is going to have to figure out a way, just like when TV came in and radio had to kind of reinvent itself. I think as we get podcasts become more of a thing, I mean, they are a thing, right? And that is something that we're going to have to say, okay, so what can we offer that a podcast can't offer? What can television, what can it offer that YouTube can't offer? And I think we're going to be heading into even more fragmentation. We're going to have more of this kind of echo chamber effect, which is unfortunate in some ways, because folks are just going to listen to those things and read those things and watch those things that agree with themselves, and they're not going to necessarily be exposed to ideas and maybe ways of thinking that are outside of what they believe or what they think they understand about the world. It's really hard because I try to be really intentional about listening to lots of different things. I have a favorite conservative podcast that I'll listen to while I'm driving. And I also have a favorite, some would say more liberal podcast. I mean, it's not like far left, crazy thing, but it's more of a mainstream liberal. And part of the reason why I do that is just to listen to what are the different people talking about? What are they focusing on? And that really helps to kind of keep me balanced in that. And, I suppose that's a boundary in some ways. And I worry about new believers. I worry about people who are just new to faith, is that they're going to have their favorite podcast. They're going to have their favorite person who is telling them about the Word of God. And I worry that they won't get exposed to anything else. And I want to make sure I find a way to be able to help folks see that, I guess. And so I think where we're not at there is, where's the real life in that? I mean, I think in the pandemic, one of the things that really was hard is we went online, which is amazing, right? We could still stay connected to each other. But in a lot of ways, we were extremely disconnected, even though in real time we could see each other, talk to each other on things like Zoom and FaceTime and whatever other, software you're using, Facebook Live, all those sorts of things, YouTube. But we didn't have that accidental rub up against each other. In the hospice, we really noticed it, right? All of our meetings went online. And now in the last few months, we've been able to have our meetings in person. And it's made them better because we have those accidental things that happen in the midst of in person, that we might be talking about a patient and it's a look across the table, that a nurse gives to me, or that a nurse gives to another nurse, or, looking at the doc, and we're able to just communicate with those nonverbals and be able to really think about how best to care for our patients, but also care for each other, right? So after the meeting, and we're having a cup of coffee or having a snack, and we're talking to each other just about life or just about what's been happening. And I have a lot more people stopping by my desk and just kind of unloading about some of the difficult patients that they've had. And, so I worry about where we're heading with some of this podcast and technology, and thinking about remote work, and thinking about getting, we can listen to the latest and greatest sermons from the best preachers out there. And that's awesome. And that's wonderful. But where's the next best preacher going to come from? Right? I mean, if every church has the best preacher ever coming in on video from a podcast, where's the new preacher going to learn? I mean, Brian and I, you and I, we were at a little, that little tiny WPRJ in Michigan, making our mistakes, learning how to be radio guys, I guess you could say, learning this business, learning how to communicate, learning how to use a microphone. And where do those guys learn? Because, you look at where I'm at now at KACS, it's Cameron and I and Michael, and we got a guy out of Colorado that does our afternoon drive. And, where's the new guy? Where's the new guy learn? Where's that overnight shift for that guy to kind of learn how to do it? It's just not there. Because, we can have Rick do it. He does our, afternoon drive, and he can do a weekend shift too, really easily. And it doesn't take much. I'm a hospice chaplain, and I'm coming in a few hours a week, and I'm, doing the middays at KACS. And, maybe that would have been a younger guy who's coming in, and he would be, in college, maybe here at the local community college, and coming in and doing that midday shift and kind of getting his legs underneath him. And, where's that going to happen? Will it happen in a podcast? Maybe. But, you got to go against all these big names, right? And, you get your podcast on Spotify, and how you going to go against Joe Rogan? And, somebody's going to be like, oh, I'd rather listen to him, man. He's awesome. Well, where did Joe Rogan get his start? Boy, it's just, those are the things that just kind of, make me a little bit nervous about what's going to happen. And we were already talking about this in the 1990s when you and I started, Brian, and we had satellite radio. So, I got me started, and we could have an entire we can sit and just rap about this for an hour.
Okay, we've talked about where we kind of think that the media is going with podcasts and radio and ministry and YouTube. So does your family have any kind of favorite Christian media outlets that they use? What apps or services do they use specifically?
This really goes with that where are we heading question. Because, I look at it in my family, right, is that I will still listen to the radio occasionally. I mean, honestly, I'm going to be listening to podcasts, and I'm going to be listening to my own Spotify playlists. I'm not necessarily listening to terrestrial radio, that's for sure. And my kids, even less, right? I mean, we have a summer concert every year with KACS at our local fair here in Chehalis, and we had, who'd we have? We had Land of Color, and we had Apollo LTD, and we had somebody else. I can't remember who it was. It doesn't matter. But anyway, my one daughter, Angela, loves Land of Color. So she showed up for Land of Color and then left. And I asked her about it. I said, why didn't you stay for the rest of it? She said, Land of Color is awesome, and I don't care about those other ones. I mean, and, it's kind of like, whoa, you know what? That's kind of the way my kids are as far as getting their Christian media. Right? You can get into my daughter's car, and she's plugging her smartphone into her car and listening to Land of Color. And that's it. She's not necessarily getting exposed to something else at all. And so their Christian media outlet isn't really a Christian media outlet. It's Spotify, right? I mean, that's where they're listening to their music. And, as far as some of that other, the other stuff that you might hear on KACS or other radio stations like that, I don't know. They haven't really gotten into it. That's kind of the way they go for it. And that's where we're heading, I think, as a media. Really is, we got to think about that as a radio station is, folks, we're not competing with other Christian radio stations. We're competing with Spotify and Pandora and all those other places, whatever Apple's music thing is called now. I don't even know anymore. Those are the things that we're competing with. And so, being a traditional media outlet, I don't think has a lot of meaning for my kids, right? Who are basically young adults now. And they're getting into that, 18 to 34. That's the demographic we all want, right? Ooh, that's the woohoo, and they're not there. They're just, I don't know if they're really there. So I think it's going to be an interesting thing. My wife will listen to Case, yes, but you know what? To be quite honest, she is right in our target audience. She is married woman in her 40s. That's who we're targeting. That's our target. And the rest, they're not there right now. I mean, there's always the exceptions that prove the rule, and there are families that listen and all that sort of thing that happens. But I think by and large, it's really my family really shows what is happening writ large in the larger community as far as where we go to get our media. We don't really care about you being a particular media outlet. I'm not going to go to Focus on the Family or any of those types of places. I'm going to go where I get music. I'm going to go to Spotify. If I'm going to get podcasts, I'm going to go to Spotify. That's where I want to go. I mean, that's what it is.
Okay, Matt, thank you so much for sharing with us here on How about your family and the various apps that you use, as well as all the Christian media outlets that you and your family use. We really appreciate that. Matthew is standing by anxiously to share with you about a unique church sign that has to do with tweeting. That's next on How.
Audible Genesis. Imaging libraries for Christian radio, and focused production music for every Christian media platform. If you're in Christian podcasting, YouTubing, concert promotion, church production, streaming, or Christian broadcasting, Audible Genesis puts affordable tools at your fingertips, making your job easier and your production smoother. In fact, Audible Genesis production elements are heard throughout this podcast. Get them for yourself at audiblegenesis.com.
And now, here is Good News with Grandma Kay.
The good news from Grandma Kay today is mostly good news for Grandma Kay. You see, it's Doc. He is the example of how to balance faith, family, and work. Because this morning he sends me this email forward thing from Facebook. I mean, I wasn't even awake yet, really. I don't even know if I had taken off my CPAP mask. And he wants me to read something long off of Facebook. So, of course, I complained. He said, no, read it. You'll really like it because it's a good thing. It's really positive. So I read it, and it's about a professor who, in front of his classroom, has a big glass jar, and he fills it up with big rocks, and he asks his university students, is it full? And they say, well, yes, of course it's full. Look, the rocks fill up the jar. Okay. Then he gets some smaller pebbles and he pours the pebbles into the jar and they fill in the crevices and spaces between the big rocks. And he asks the university students again, is it full? And they say, well, yes, it's full. Look, no more can fit in. So then he gets out a bag of sand, pours some sand in there and he shakes it and sifts it down and puts more sand in, shifts it, shakes it, puts in more and more. Is it full? And they say, of course, well, yes, it's full. He said, well, this jar is your life. You should fill it with the most important things first, because what would have happened if I put in the sand first? So fill your life with the important things. The rocks are things like your faith, your family, your partner, children, and the smaller pebbles are the things that really matter, like your job, your health, your house. And the sand is everything else. And just imagine, if you spent all your time on the everything else's, you would think your life was full, but you could have so much more. So it's really nice that Doc sent that to me because he is my prescription for good news.
Good news with Grandma Kay. On How. At B&K Productions, our job is to provide quality top-notch and professional voiceover for your project. It could be narration for a YouTube video, podcast imaging. You can also utilize a great production library from now.audiblegenesis.com. For more information about what B&K Productions can do for your audio or video project, you can contact Brian Irwin bnkproductions@gmail.com. B&K Productions, where quality is our number one priority.
How from Audible Genesis and B&K Productions.
Welcome back to How. I'm Brian Doc Irwin alongside Matt March. Now, Matt, I have to ask this question because if you're like me, you drive around, you see church signs. And I just want to know what the funniest, the most profound, most impactful church sign you've ever seen.
Boy, that's kind of a hard one. Let me think. You know what? I just saw this one the other day, and it fits what we're kind of talking about. It said, tweet others as you would like to be tweeted. I think that's an important piece of advice for these days.
Actually, that church sign is kind of profound when you stop and think about it. Okay, Matt, so our next question is, if you can watch one movie 10 times in a row with your kids, which movie would it be?
Oh boy, that's an easy one. It'd have to be Psych the movie, because my family, my kids and I, we are psychos, and we have gotten into that show Psych. We watched it while it was on TV, and now we watch it. It's online, it's streaming, and they've had 3 movies now. We would watch those over and over again and laugh like crazy. I really like Dule Hill. I've loved him. I loved him in West Wing. He thought he's been a good actor, and just enjoy watching him work as well. And so that would be something for me anyway, as a treat, is watching an artist at his craft. That would be one that I would be able to watch that 10 times in a row.
You know, I've never seen the movies. I've seen a few episodes of Psych, but I've never seen the movies, so I'll have to check that out.
As an aside for that, I think, Brian, that would fit you, because, you know, I used to always pick on you about how you're always quoting movies and everything, and the characters in Psych are always quoting stuff from the 80s. And, you know, I think of you every time I watch one of those shows or that movie. I'm like, yeah, this would be something Brian would do.
Yes, I do quote my fair share of the movies from the 80s and the 90s, and there are some movies that I quote more than others. And sometimes I think I drive my wife, Karen, as you know, her Grandma Kay, pretty crazy. So, Matt, you've been working at your current radio job for a few years, and of course you worked with me at WPRJ many years ago. What has been the best job in Christian media you've ever had?
Oh boy, my best job in Christian media, I really only had 2, right? I mean, I had the one that when I worked with you, Brian, at WPRJ in Coleman, and then this one at KACS here in Chehalis. I'm going to have to say it's KACS, and I don't think it has anything to do necessarily with the radio stations as it is, but it may be about me and being able to be mature enough to know what's mine and know what isn't mine. And this is kind of, I describe my work at KACS is that it's the hobby I get paid for. And I don't mean that to dismiss it, like it's not important. I mean, like I treat this like someone who is a railroad guy, you know, that is got the big layout in his basement, and he's obsessed with, you know, whatever gauge railroad he's working on. Yeah, that's the way I treat this, is that this is just this amazing time that I get to share God's word and be able to do something that not a lot of people can do, right? I mean, folks will hear, "Oh, you do radio? Wow, that's amazing." I'm like, yeah, well, okay. Yeah, it's pretty cool, but I just do it. They pay me to talk, right? And it's pretty amazing. And I have a boss who understands my limitations and understands that, chaplaincy comes first. Before it was, the church came first for me. My call as a pastor came first, and this is always second to what's happening. And I think that's been really important for me, is that this is a place that, and I'm valued here, right? I mean, it's kind of hard not to be. It's me and Cameron and Michael, basically, are the three guys who take care of everything on air for this radio station, making sure everything's up and on and ready to go, and voicing things and making it happen. And so every single one of us has a job, has a role, and we fill that, and that's been really good for me. So I guess I'm gonna have to say this one. And like I say, it's not about that PRJ was a bad place. That was a lot of fun. I mean, we had some young folk. We were lots of youth. I mean, Brian, I think you were the oldest on air, other than Jeff, the morning guy. But, the rest of us were all college students or just out of college and starting something new. It's exciting. We're building it. I mean, that was pretty amazing too. And there were a lot of things that were really amazing about it. But I guess, to look at it, if I have to choose, I'd have to choose this one. And like I say, I think mostly it's about me and about my maturity and where I'm at.
If you had a Christian media dream job, Matthew, what would that be?
Boy, my dream job, I've been thinking about that a lot. And I think, I would love to be in a media company, which I think, as I look at what KACS is doing, is we're going from a radio ministry to a media company, right? We have our FM signals all over Western Washington, but then we also have a web stream, and we have an app that people can listen, and really starting to kind of branch out into different ways of getting to people. And so I really talk about it. Yeah, I think media company is a good way to think about it, but I think a media company that is working and based in the local community. So I could see it as something where it's a media company where, it's the one who is known for doing high school sports, right? And having those on the media platform, whatever it is, if it's FM, if it's podcast, if it's streaming, if it's both, if it's all of it, having that, and then being able to be a place where young folks can learn. Because I'm starting to get to that age, right? I'm starting to get close to 50, and I'm starting to think about what's my legacy and how can I bring somebody else into this thing that I'm doing. Like, I've been announcing basketball games since I was 15 years old. So that's, I'm 47 now, and thinking about looking for that 15-year-old that shows an aptitude for what I'm doing and mentoring them. And I'd love to be a part of a Christian media company where that's what we're doing. Is a big part of our thing is, serving the community, making sure, bringing the word of God, but also mentoring young people to get into this, to be able to communicate the gospel appropriately on all of these different media platforms, and helping them to be able to do that, to find their voice and how they can be a part of sharing God's word. I think that's really, really super important. So I would love to be able to be a part of something like that, and trying to find a way to do that. And I've thought about it, and I have some ideas of what it might look like, but I haven't really fleshed it out 100%. And maybe I'll get an opportunity to be able to do that. But I think that would be my dream job, is just to be a media platform company that has lots of different ways of reaching out with the gospel, mentoring young people, and then also serving the community, and and doing things like because like you do high school sports, right? It's not technically Christian. You do a public school, but all of a sudden you've got mom and dad because the kids are on the road and they can't go to the game, so they're listening to it or watching it. I mean, we've got ways to be able to video games now. They're streaming, but there's no audio with it. And, I was watching one of those streams and it was kind of boring. And I thought, what would it look like if, as part of a Christian media platform that gave voice to that, right? Did the play-by-play, did the color, and made that more interesting to watch. And then, those community members, those families, they just so happened to keep on listening when the format went back to Christian. And what could that look like? And how many people could be reached for the gospel? I mean, that would be an amazing, I think, thing to happen. We would have to be good at it. And, sometimes in Christian media, that's not always what we're thinking about. We'd have to be really good at it. But I think that would be a dream job for me.
So, Matt, to kind of wrap up our podcast, I have one final question for you. It is your pithy 1 or 2 sentence piece of advice to anyone that's balancing faith and family with 2 jobs. How do you do it?
Know what's yours. That's it. Know what's yours and let the rest of it go. If you're not responsible for it, don't worry about it. That's something that I learned very early in hospice. I think it's something we don't do very well in the church. We think we got to fix everything. But when I got into hospice and, working with my team, and they said, hey, you know what? Some of these families are going to come to us and they're really going to be screwed up and we're not going to be able to fix it. We got to figure out what's ours. And then what is that we have to put back on the family and say, you have to fix this. Because you know what? This has been going on for 50 years. This is going on for 100 years. We're not going to fix it in the 6 months that your patient is on hospice, nor are we going to try because it'll just make us crazy. So just know what's yours and just do what's yours.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was some really, really good advice. And thank you so much for joining us on How. It's been great to have you as a guest and so great to talk to you once again.
I'm glad I could join you today. Brian, I'm having a little bit of an issue with explaining to my kids exactly what's going on here because, you realize we've known each other for almost 30 years and my children don't know your real name. I was telling them that I'm going to be doing this podcast with Brian and they're like, Brian, who? Who's that guy? And I said, Doc. And they're like, oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, we know Doc. Yeah. So, we've just known each other so long that we don't even need names anymore, or at least not real names anyway. I guess you could call me Bigfoot, I suppose.
That is just too funny. Well, we'll see you next time on How. Until then, I'm Brian Docker, and thank you for listening.
How, from Audible Genesis and B&K Productions. How Christian media pros balance work, faith, and family. Get it wherever you get your podcasts. And get production music for your podcast, stream, YouTube channel, church, or radio station at now.audiblegenesis.com. How is a joint effort of Audible Genesis and B&K Productions. For more information, email brianerwin.bnkproductions@gmail.com. How, from Audible Genesis.